Hello beautifuls, and welcome to our very last case we'll be covering for the year of 2023. Unfortunately, we will be ending this year with a very gruesome case, and this is a disclaimer that I'm setting before I even start the video. There's a lot of sexual violence happening as well as dismemberment of a corpse. So viewer discretion is advised, and I'd like to state that if you feel like you'd be uncomfortable going further with watching the video, I ask that you please discontinue and please click on my other videos so you can watch those ones. And let's get into today's unfortunate case. DBP Weekly Report. So in today's case, we'll be covering the Hello Kitty murder case, and this is one of the most gruesome cases I have ever come across. And it reminded me of the Junko Furuko case, which I'll be covering later on within one of my episodes. So Fan Man Yi was born, and she was immediately abandoned by her family, where she had to now reside within an orphanage. Now, I don't know whether this is a rule within Hong Kong orphanages or what the case may be, but as soon as you turn 16, you're kicked out of the orphanage to accommodate other people, and I guess technically you're a young adult, so you can now fend for yourself, which does not make sense, because why are you in an orphanage in the first place if you could happen to support yourself? But nonetheless, once she turned 16, she was told to please leave, and then she fell into drugs, and unfortunately she became addicted to it. And the way that she could feed her habits and also feed herself, she was forced into street prostitution. So eventually, when she turned 21, she decided to now actually work at a brothel. And it was at one of these brothels that she was working at where she met her future husband. And as one of her frequent clients, I guess they started courting each other, and then there they became married. And then 2 years later, in 1996, she gave birth to their child. This couple was very abusive towards each other, and it was just a tumultuous relationship, to the point where neighbors were actually calling police every other time, just speaking about the noises that the child was making, the constant crying, the screeching, the shouting, the fighting, things being thrown in the house. It was just all so crazy. And eventually, once her child was born, she decided that, you know what, I'm gonna quit drugs so that I can try and better myself and the future of my child. And then after a few months later, she also decided to leave her abusive husband and try to actually create a better future for herself without anything that's trying to hold her back or forcing her to go back into that sort of life that she was living in the beginning. So even though she was determined to be on the path that was straight and narrow, she still needed a way to acquire income. And I'm assuming that because she's been doing sexual work for quite some time, she knew that she could acquire a certain amount of income guaranteed. So she started working at a nightclub by the name of Empress Karaoke. And while she was there, she met a man by the name of Chan Man Lok, the 33-year-old Wu Jing triad member, and he developed a very strong penchant for Fan, and to the point where he actually would pay for longer sessions of throwing caution to the wind, and he'd spend more time with her, and just constantly, every time he came to that brothel, or that nightclub rather, he'd make sure that he's only gonna go for Fan and Fan only. So during their sessions or before their sessions, they'd drink and then also do drugs, which was kind of conflicting, because obviously I just said now that, she's taking her life on the straight and narrow, and she quit drugs and things of that nature, but then she's back here saying that they're using drugs and ice. So I'm assuming that she had a relapse, just to keep everybody on the same page. I'm assuming that she had relapsed, and while she was working at this nightclub, to also, I guess, I'm pretty sure self-image had a play factor, having a child had a play factor in her relapsing into using drugs again. But nonetheless, during their binges and coitus having moments, she decided that in the moment, I'm going to steal this gangster's wallet. She does not know what came over her. Nobody knows what came over her to do that. But nonetheless, of course, there's two of them in a room. You know, they were all drugged up together. They were all drunk together. And then next thing you know, a wallet goes missing. If it's not the other one, it's definitely going to be the other one. So immediately when he's like patting down his pockets to look, he's like, where the hell is my wallet? And then he looks at Fan and he's like, give me back my wallet, as well as the 4,000 Hong Kong dollars that were in it. And she immediately gave it back to him and she started apologizing. I'm sorry. I don't know what overcame me. Please don't do anything to me. I'm really sorry. I'll never do this again. I guess it was just a moment of despair. But he did not want to hear any of that sort of BS, I guess. To the point where he said that on top of this 4,000 Hong Kong dollars that you gave me, I want an extra 10,000 Hong Kong dollars, because what is this thing that you're trying to do? You're trying to bamboozle me, you know? And yet I come here every time to pay for your services and you think you can steal from me, a triad member. And she's like, please don't do this, you know? Because I mean, at the end of the day, if she stole the 4,000 Hong Kong dollars, where on earth is she gonna get that 10,000 Hong Kong dollars from? Again, like I said, he did not want to hear anything of that sort. So it's either a few days later or later on that day, he organized three guys, three including himself, took her to the seedy underbelly apartment that Chan Man Lok owned and was on Granville Road. Now to backtrack, a 14-year-old girl walks into the Hong Kong police station and she tells them that she has something to get off her chest. So the police are there like, okay, what do you have to say? So then she tells them about how there's this woman that's just haunting her, you know, constantly every day. She feels like she's living deja vu. This lady will not leave her alone. Keep constantly passing her vision. When she sleeps, she's being haunted. When she's awake, she's being haunted. So now the police are like, they're skeptical, you know, because I mean, they don't deal with the paranormal. But then now she's mentioning a woman being hung and these graphic depictions that have been done to this woman's body. So they're like, okay, let's start perking our ears and actually hearing what's going on. And she continues to say that, and I was also involved in her murder. And that's when the ears started getting perked and they're like, what exactly are you talking about? And she's like, I can take you down to this apartment whereby this whole thing happened. And that's exactly what she did. And the police officers followed her to this apartment. And immediately when they opened it, it was just dingy. There was Hello Kitty merch everywhere. And the apartment also smelled, it just reeked. And then she'd show them that there's this, there, that's that. And this is where this happened. And over there, that's what we did to her. So now to explain what actually happened to Fan Man Yi's body, I'm going to put another disclaimer. So these three guys, like I said, hired either his henchmen, but all we know is that it was two guys that were also from the same triad gang to obviously kidnap her and take them to this apartment that Chan Man Lok had owned. So when these men got to the apartment, they put her on the floor and they immediately just started having their way with her. Continuously and multiple days on end, started sexually assaulting her, as well as beating her continuously about the head, on her body, on her legs. And they also put hot wax and hot plastic on top of her feet. So I guess that she doesn't escape when she has the opportunity to. They beat her with a metal bar, and she suffered so much. Like, it's completely horrendous. Like, they just constantly sexually assaulted her. They beat her so many times and over a long span of time. And every time they would sexually assault her and beat her up, they told her, smile, act like you like this, show us you're enjoying this, laugh, just some sadistic things that these depraved people wanted to achieve, So obviously, as she's constantly being beaten, she's not being fed, she's malnourished at this point, she's not attractive for them to sexually assault, So then they decide that on top of that, she's also not making any sounds. Like, she doesn't have the adrenaline, she doesn't have the energy to show her pain anymore. Because I feel like maybe she might have reached a sort of plateau of how much pain she could feel within her, and they just didn't enjoy like beating her anymore, because like she's boring. Who wants to beat a silent person? So they decide, you know what, we'll hang her. They hung her by her arms, and they just started beating her again and again and again and again and again. So many things that did not need to happen happened. And on top of her being beaten, they decide, you know what? Let us also put some spicy oil on top of all her wounds. And that's exactly what they did. They put spicy oils on the wounds, on her legs, on her head. They finally took her down from being hung, and they just started kicking her head so many times. And it just swelled up, and she just looked like a miniature balloon, for crying out loud, And this 14-year-old girl that I was talking about was actually Chan Man Lok's girlfriend. And I think it's very much obvious to assume that she was groomed into being here. No 14-year-old is just gonna go date a 33-year-old gang member, So to not only implicate these three men, Chan Man is like, you know what? Come join us. And she was also forced to kick the girl, beat her up. And another sadistic thing that they did was to excrete on the floor and force her to eat these feces and be happy while doing it. It's assumed that all of the men had pooped on the floor, as well as this girl, and urinated, and they forced her to eat all these excrements and be so happy about it. And forced her to be so happy about it like it's some joyous occasion. So then one day, this is very much unclear whether she passed away while they were in the apartment, these perpetrators, or while they were out the apartments. But all we know is that they found her body, and then they decided to put her within the bathtub. So this 14-year-old girl was over at the house, at her boyfriend's house, and she decided to go use the bathroom. And when she opened the door, she stumbled upon the body inside the bathtub. And it just so happens that that very same day, when she passed away, on the 15th or the 16th of April, there was actually a police raid that was going on downstairs. And they obviously like, oh my gosh, there's police. So they start being frantic. What are we going to do? Can everybody just go their separate ways and come up with ways to do things, And we'll meet again tomorrow. And that's exactly what happened. They met on, I'm sorry, I have some sort of cough situation going on right now. My apologies for the heavy breathing that's going on. They met up the next day, and before they even started saying what plan must be done, let's do this, let's do that, Chan Man Lok decides to take the lead and he says, everybody shut up, we're gonna do my plan. And his plan, I'm sorry, but this creature is very, very peculiar, preposterous, and very much evil. So he decides that, you know what, we cannot carry her out of the apartment. Second thing, she's gonna stink up the apartment if she's just there in the bathtub, decomposing. So this is what they decide to do. They decide that they're going to decapitate her head and also put it in a boiling pot so that they could get rid of the flesh upon her face. And I've also read that you can also shrink a skull when you put it inside hot water at a certain temperature. And they went on to also dismember her arms, her torso, her legs. And while this was happening, it took 10 hours. And within these very 10 hours that was happening, they also decided that, you know what, we are hungry. So they took a break within these 10 hours and they made noodles. On the very same stove, using the very same spoon that they are using to stir up her head. They're using the same spoon that they used to stir up her head and used it to stir up their noodles. They ate and went back to business. They called over this 14-year-old girl to come over and help, because at the end of the day, she can also be implicated because she did kick the girl, she did do that, she did do that. So as they were continuously chopping up her body into small pieces, they asked the girls to put them inside the plastic and transfer them into the defreeze. And that was just the process that was happening. 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, 7 hours, 10 hours later, they were finally done with dismembering and decapitating the body. They took the part off the stove, they took out her head, they found a Hello Kitty doll. It was a huge doll, which I'll put the picture of, and they then inserted her head within the doll and sewed it back up again. So when the 14-year-old took the police over to the house, they found this toy that the 14-year-old girl had said was going to be there, and they said that once they open up the toy of the Hello Kitty, they'll find the skull of Fan Man Yi within it. They also found some flesh around just a bit. They found a tooth, and she also told them that in the defreeze there was this and that. And I guess forensic people came over and they took in all the DNA that they could possibly find. They round up all the guys and they then took them to trial. So when they arrived at the trial, it just became a, oh no, he did this, no, it was him, oh no, I didn't do this, actually it was her. So then obviously the 14-year-old's story, 13, 14, again, it's conflicting information. We also don't know this girl's name because at the end of the day, she is a juvenile and it's not obligated by law to then say what her name is or who her identity is in general. So this 14-year-old girl gave her story to say that this is what happened. They beat her up, they raped her, they sexually assaulted her, and so on and so forth. But these three guys are like, actually, that's a lie. That's not what happened. Now, the thing is, we actually own a prostitution ring, and she's actually one of our sex workers. And it just so happened that she was high on whatever drug she was doing, and she just happened to overdose. And we were scared because we don't want to be implicated within her death. So we decided to then dismember her and get rid of her body. So obviously within that in itself, the fact that she died and you thought that the best way to go about saving your business and saving your gluteus maximus is by obviously dismembering this poor girl's body, because you don't want to be implicated in any nature, and not like running a prostitution ring is not illegal in many states of the country. The police did not fall for this, and they were later charged with a manslaughter. And the reason why it was not first degree or second degree was because they can't find the actual cause of death, because her body was chopped up into so many pieces that it was difficult for any forensic pathologist to determine any type of cause of death. But what they could say for certain was that she suffered some sort of abuse before her death. The jury didn't find that this was enough evidence. It was circumstantial at best, and manslaughter is what they could give them. And Chan Man Lok and the other two guys were charged with 20 years of no parole, and then after those 20 years they can then get parole. In 2020 they were allowed to then apply for early release or apply for parole, but thankfully the parole was denied, and two of them, okay, let me explain. Unfortunately, one of the men was allowed parole and was released, and his name was Shin Cho. And it just so happens that a few years later, he found his gluteus maximus back into state penitentiary because he sexually assaulted a 10-year-old girl. So you telling me that this man, and this is something that I forgot to mention, he was actually the one that was stirring the head in the pot, and he actually asked the 14-year-old girl to come and see inside the pot. And it's not scary, no, it just looks like the movies. And then this 14-year-old girl went and saw within the pot this head being stirred. She was like, it actually does look like the movies. That very same man was allowed to be released from prison. He sexually assaults a 10-year-old girl. And then he's brought back. Where did you think it was gonna go? If you can be so depraved and sadistic to force a girl to eat your excrements and you sexually assault her day in, day out, pour wax on her legs, where did you think the change was gonna come from? And to think that this girl has not gone through enough already. Oh, the media decided to go on a spree of bashing her and just making fun of this whole situation, like she did not just suffer the most horrendous abuse within any type of history, if you ask me. There were movies like Human Pork Chop, and also There's a Secret in My Soup. And it's just the media just made so many movies, and they made such fun of the whole situation, and that it also involved this iconic idol, Hello Kitty. And it's like, oh my gosh, you know, they just went on a field day. I'm sorry, but this case was mishandled. This case was mishandled so much, to the point where even after she had passed away, people were going to that apartment, taking pictures of this and that. And fortunately enough, the building was demolished, or it was that apartment that was demolished. But nonetheless, this girl went through so much. She did not deserve this whatsoever. I get the fact that, yes, maybe someone could say that, but she chose to become a prostitute, and yes, and that. But we all take different parts of life to get where we need to get to. And if it means that you have to make your way by having to essentially use what God has given you, then you do so. But it doesn't mean that now because you have been involved in this sort of life, then you deserve some sort of death or ill will to befall you. And with that being said, I'm gonna wrap up this case by saying thank you very much for watching my video. I know we're ending the year in this very, very sad manner with regards to this case. But nonetheless, I really hope that Fan Man Yi rests in peace wherever she is. Let's say this case was very sad, honestly speaking. But nonetheless, if you enjoyed, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Please tell me what other cases you'd like for me to cover in the future, and whether or not you think I should work on something. And just tell me that you enjoy it, you know? Subscribe. Guys, we're at 71 subscribers. Road to 100. But nonetheless, I pray that you enjoy this day wherever you are. I pray that God protects you, and be blessed. Peace, everybody.